Thank you all for being with me tonight. I am so grateful to see such a big crowd turn out for this. It was nice to see where you all came from, who told you about the class. I see some physicians in there. That's my aim, is to get more physicians referring to this type of program so that we can put off that diabetes diagnosis. My name is Julie Husmann. I am a registered dietitian, a health promotion educator, and a diabetes educator here with the Center for Good Health. I worked in diabetes education for probably over 7 years, working with both people with diabetes as well as people diagnosed with pre-diabetes. Hopefully down the line we'll have all insurance companies paying for you to see a diabetes educator with that diagnosis of pre-diabetes so that we can prevent that. That's our ultimate goal. But for now we have to sneak these types of presentations in to get you all some education along the way. So I hope that this is an information-packed program. I have set it up that way, so I have definitely an hour and a half worth of information to share with you, but I want it to be very interactive. If you have questions that really are triggered by something that I talk about, I want to make sure you get your questions answered tonight as well. But if you feel like I kind of skip over you a little bit, I'll definitely address things at the end. I can certainly stay a little bit later if you have specific questions that were not answered with the presentation. So tonight we're going to talk about prediabetes, steps to gain control. I know there's probably some of you here that have already been diagnosed with diabetes, but that doesn't change the lifestyle factors that we're going to talk about tonight. So I still think that you'll learn a thing or two, but we will primarily focus on prevention. That's our whole goal. So one of the first handouts that you have is risk factors, and we want to start out by defining what prediabetes is. Very simply put, prediabetes is where your blood sugars are elevated, but not to the point of diabetes. And we'll look at those lab values in just a minute. But to look at who is at risk, what brought me here tonight? What is it that is in my background or lifestyle that has triggered this prediabetes diagnosis? Your risk factors are, simply put, anybody over the age of 45 should be screened for diabetes. And most all of you, if you go to the doctor on an annual basis, you have an annual physical drawing that will include a comprehensive metabolic panel of blood tests that will include a glucose test. So that will be on there. Most people have it regardless of their age, but at over age 45, doctors should be screening for this because it's more common in people over that age. Non-Caucasian, our African American population, American Indian population, Asian Americans are more likely to have diabetes than the Caucasian population. Metabolic syndrome. How many of you have heard of metabolic syndrome? A couple of you shaking your heads. It's just a cluster of disorders, so to speak. Lab values, weight that are out of order that they clustered together and found that is more common in a person with prediabetes and diabetes. It includes your excess weight. We'll talk about where that weight matters. I kind of just snuck in a slide there a second ago by accident that we'll talk about the pear and the apple shape. In addition, high blood pressure, low HDL cholesterol. Which cholesterol is that, the good or the bad? Okay. Low HDL. That's the good one, exactly. So when you think of the two, HDL, think healthy, LDL, think lousy. Easy way to remember it. But if it's low, we clearly want this one higher. It's a problem if it's low, so that's the good cholesterol. In addition to high triglycerides, that's your storage form of fat in the body. So when you eat fat and when you store it, that's how it's stored, as triglycerides. In addition, at the very end there, which is what most of you have here tonight, impaired glucose tolerance. When you see the word glucose, automatically think sugar. When I use the terms, back and forth, glucose, sugar, I'm saying the same thing. It just depends on what I'm talking about, that I might go back and forth between a sugar level or a glucose level. It is the same thing. Glucose is the form of sugar that's in your blood, just as sucrose is the form of sugar that you eat in your coffee in the morning or over your cereal, or that you put in your baked goods. Fructose is the fruit sugar. Okay, so just when you hear the OSE on the end, it's got something to do with a sugar. In addition, other risk factors for diabetes is inactivity level. Family history of diabetes, not much you can do about that, but that's certainly a risk factor. Polycystic ovarian syndrome. That's obviously for women who have lots of cysts around their ovaries. They are at increased risk for diabetes as well. They often treat polycystic ovarian syndrome with the same medication that they use in treating diabetes, metformin or glucophage. Personal history of gestational diabetes. That means you women, if you had diabetes during pregnancy, you are automatically at increased risk for diabetes in later life. We'll talk about what gestational diabetes is in a moment. And then acanthosis nigricans is another clinical condition related to insulin resistance where we have a thickening and a darkening of the skin around the neck or the armpits. If a person has that, the doctor's definitely going to be looking for that diabetes diagnosis.
What about taking antidepressants? Is there any data on how that impacts diabetes?
No, not that I'm aware of. No direct link to say that you're increased risk. Do a lot of medicines raise blood sugar? Absolutely. Many medicines, and not just antidepressants, but lots of medicines. When you look at side effects, some of them say raise blood sugar. The worst of the worst is a medicine you absolutely have to have if you need it, and that's a steroid. Any type of steroid medication definitely spikes a person's blood sugar. Now, if you have that family history of diabetes, then those kind of meds will definitely tip you over the edge. Okay? But just somebody who has no family history of diabetes, that has no other risk factors for diabetes, just taking an antidepressant probably won't tip them over the edge. But everybody's body's different, so can I blanket statement that? Not necessarily, but that is not one of the risk factors that they'd watch for. Good question. So here's that apple versus pear shaped. Talked about excess weight. The excess weight where it's located on the body is what makes the difference in your risk for diabetes. So you've got the two on the left there, which is the apple shape where they're carrying the weight around the midsection. That's the weight that they have determined is causing your insulin not to work so well. So it impacts your insulin action, and if insulin doesn't work properly, blood sugars are going to go up. We'll look at the action of insulin in a minute here. Whereas if you carry your weight below the midsection, where you're on the hips, like a lot of women do, that weight isn't necessarily unhealthy in the sense of talking about diabetes risk. You have the inches on the bottom there, a man greater than 40 inches around the waist section and a woman greater than 35 inches around the waist. And what you would do is just take a tape measure around your belly button with no clothes on. Don't pull it real snug. Don't suck it in. Just let it be natural. You can measure your waist and you know if that's one of your risk factors. Okay, but that is definitely one area of the body where we carry weight that will impact the blood sugar level. All right, so again, you have a handout that gives you all the risk factors. You can kind of walk right through it. Again, most of you know you're at risk or you wouldn't be here, but sometimes it's nice to kind of look over that list with maybe family members or friends to say, hey, you know, this is something to consider. So let's look at some of the lab values that are taken to determine your diagnosis. We have 3 different tests that the doctors will order to determine a person's glucose control. And the first one is the fasting blood sugar. Again, you may see it written as fasting blood glucose level. So normal, somebody without any blood sugar problems, when they fast overnight and go to the lab and get their blood drawn, their blood sugar is going to be between 70 and 99. Where that gray area is, before we get to diabetes, is your pre-diabetes mark, 100 to 125. You may have heard that called, and maybe you are still calling it, borderline diabetes. I don't know why people in the research world didn't like that terminology, but they took that away and they said, no, it's pre-diabetes. I guess when they use the term borderline, they make people feel like, well, either you have it or you don't. Well, this pre-diabetes, it definitely uses that terminology diabetes to get people thinking about it, but it is in that gray area from normal to diabetic. Then when the blood sugar, fasting glucose level, tips over 126, typically on 2 separate occasions, that's when you expect your doctor to tell you that you do have diabetes. Okay?
Your A1C is low.
What if your A1C is low? We'll get to that. Yep. I knew we'd all be jumping ahead because you all know a lot about this already. I know you do. We'll come to that, and that's what we want to look at. We typically want to do 2 different tests. If your doctor just sees a blood sugar of 126 or 128 and then does nothing more, I would encourage them, let's confirm it with another test, whether it be another fasting or the A1C, which we'll look at in a second.
Like between how much time? Like 6
Right away.
months?
No.
3 weeks?
Right away. There's no reason you couldn't do it right away. Because if you have 2 fasting blood sugars that are higher than 126, that's that diabetes diagnosis. What most doctors will do is start using that A1C level. They'll do a confirmation with that one, and I'll show you why. This one I don't see done quite as often, but how many of you have gone to the lab fasting and then they make you drink that sugary drink? Couple of you? Yeah. It's great, isn't it? Really tasty? It's not. I've heard it is so overly sweet that it's kind of sickening. But what you do is you fast again overnight. You go into the lab, you have your blood drawn, so they have your fasting blood sugar. Then they make you drink that sugary drink, and you sit there for 2 hours, and they test your blood sugar at 1 hour and then again at 2 hours to see how high your level is. If somebody doesn't have any problems with blood sugar control, they're going to be under 140. In between, pre-diabetes, 140 to 199. If that blood level tips over 200, again, that's when you can expect the doctor to say you have diabetes, as long as they confirm it with either another one of those tests or they do 1 2-hour glucose tolerance and a fasting. Both of them were high. You're going to probably be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Okay? Now, here's your A1C. That is your blood sugar control over the past 3 months. Okay? Under 5.6, and I sometimes goof on this because I've always just said 4 to 6 is normal. But they're tightening up these numbers because they're realizing even at the pre-diabetes stage of blood sugar control, people are starting to have complications. That just the beginning point of cardiovascular disease and retinopathy, problems with the eyes. So they're really tightening up these numbers so that we can catch people more quickly and address those concerns, whether it be with lifestyle intervention or with medications. Okay? So under 5.6 is considered normal. 5.7 to 6.4 is your pre-diabetes mark. Once it's over that 6.5 mark, that's when the diabetes diagnosis comes in. So you had mentioned previously, what if the fasting blood sugar is high, but the A1C is low? Then that right there tells you it's probably not diabetes. But you watch it every 3 to 6 months based on your doctor's recommendation to get those tests drawn again. Because again, the let's say it was 5.6, that shows you've got pretty good control over the past 3 months. So that's why doctors need to do 2 of those different tests. And again, sometimes they'll do 2 fastings. Sometimes they'll do a fasting and an A1C. That combination was just recently accepted. It's probably been 2 years, as yes, you can use that as a diagnosis. Otherwise, it was required to have 2 fasting or 2 2-hour glucose tolerance tests that were high. And you know, that's hard. If you've had that sugary drink, you want to do that twice? Most people go, no, I'm not going in and drinking that thing again. So it's kind of nice. One way to look at the A1C, I always used to use this with people, is telling people that measures how sticky sweet you are. Your red blood cells die off over a 3-month period of time. You regenerate new red blood cells. So essentially what they're testing is how much sugar is stuck to your red blood cells. And ironically, I ran across this little cartoon that says, she's telling her patient, the red circles are your red blood cells, the white circles are your white blood cells, and the brown ones are donuts. We need to talk. And really, you know, you can't mask what you did over the last 3 months when you get that A1C tested. You know that you all behave before you go to your doctor. Because you want that scale to say like at least 5 pounds less than what it does at home or what it did last time. Well, sorry, this is 3 months. The last month is the greatest impact, or has the greatest impact on that number, but still, we can see what you've been doing. So, and it may not be donuts. It could be, you know, cakes and cookies and pies and pizza and pasta, for that matter. So we'll look at some of that. All right. So, what type of diabetes are you at risk for? How many of you know what type of diabetes you're at risk for? Quite a few of you. Okay. How many types of diabetes do we have? Yep, we can't forget the third one, and that's one a lot of us don't talk about. If you haven't had a baby or you're a man, you probably don't really think about the third one. So let's look at the first, type 1. This is typically diagnosed in early childhood or early adulthood, I should say. Most people will say it can be diagnosed up to age 30, but I've seen people age 35 and 45 be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. These people's pancreas, the organ that produces insulin, no longer produces insulin. It is just not making enough to help with blood sugar control. They have no choice but to take insulin shots. Okay, so that's type 1. Right from the beginning, they're going to need insulin. Then we have type 2, where the body either cannot produce enough or what we are producing is not working properly. And we'll look at that definition, what that means here in just a minute. The third one is your gestational diabetes that occurs during pregnancy. When a woman who has, again, genetic history, or an older woman who becomes pregnant, they're at increased risk for gestational diabetes. The placenta that carries the baby puts out a hormone into the bloodstream that makes their insulin less effective. So they could be producing plenty of insulin, but it's just not working right because of the hormone that this placenta is putting out. So when the baby's born, the placenta's gone. We don't have to worry about blood sugar control because that hormone is no longer there. Blood sugars return right back to normal. Most often, it's like immediately after birth. But that puts that woman at increased risk for the type 2 diabetes 5-10 years down the road. And some of you may be here because of that. Okay? Then there's this guy who's diagnosed with type 8. Says his doctor tells him he has type 8, which is type 2 with 4 more excuses for not exercising. I don't know how true that is, but let's see if I can get this going for you. This is a little quick clip of the action of insulin.
When you hear the word insulin, you may think of a drug taken by people who have diabetes. While this is true, what you may not know is that insulin is one of the many hormones created in the human body. Insulin is important to the body. It allows blood sugar, or glucose, to get into cells to provide them with energy. When you eat, your body breaks down food into glucose in your small intestine. This is your body's source of energy for everything it does, from working and thinking to exercising and healing. Glucose travels through your bloodstream looking for individual cells that need energy. For glucose to get into the cells, it requires insulin. Insulin is the key that unlocks cells for glucose to enter and deliver energy. When insulin arrives, it signals the cell to activate glucose transporters. These transporters pull glucose through cell walls. When glucose moves into the cell, it delivers energy. Insulin is normally produced in the pancreas. When glucose enters your bloodstream, the pancreas matches it with the right amount of insulin to move glucose into your cells. In people with type 2 diabetes, the pancreas may not be doing its entire job. It may produce less and less insulin over time. If this happens, there isn't enough insulin in the bloodstream to unlock cells. With the cells locked, glucose can't get where it is needed to provide energy. In some type 2 diabetes patients, cells build up a resistance to insulin. Even though there may be enough insulin in the bloodstream, it can't unlock cells to allow glucose to enter. As a result, it takes more insulin to find the right key to unlock the cell for glucose. This makes it more difficult for cells to get the energy they need.
So we'll move on from there, and let's look at it in a little bit more simplistic view of thinking of your cell doors. Every cell in your body runs on sugar for energy. And all those cells have doors that have to open, so your insulin is a key to that door. It unlocks your cell doors and lets it open up, hopefully, to let the sugar out of the bloodstream into the cell where you burn it up for energy. Sugar in the bloodstream is not energy to you. It's like, think of it this way, the gas in the gas tank of a car. You can't drive your car without gas in the gas tank. We've got to get sugar into our gas tanks, which is our cell. The sugar in the bloodstream is like gas in a gas can sitting next to your car. Doesn't do you any good until you pour it in, right? So insulin is the hormone, again produced by the pancreas, opens up your cell doors, letting that sugar in. The problem is those two broken systems that they talked about. You have the insulin resistance or insulin deficiency. Insulin resistance. Do you have a doorman that's opening up your doors? Or do you have a bouncer standing at the door going, no way, no how, not going to let you in? And there's various reasons that bouncer is hanging out there. Some of it is that weight sitting around the middle section. The fat cells block the insulin from doing its job, meaning it's blocking that keyhole. You're mucking up the keyhole with either fat you're consuming in your diet or the fat that you wear around the midsection. Okay? Then we have the insulin deficiency. Your pancreas is going out of business. It's tired. I had a client in here today. She was 90 years old, and she just felt she should not need insulin. Wouldn't take the dose that was recommended by her doctor. I'm like, why not? Because I shouldn't have to. I said, how many years ago were you diagnosed with diabetes? Oh, she thought for a while. I really had no idea. 45 years ago. She's 90, insisting she doesn't need the insulin. She has a poopy pancreas. It's pooped. It has had to produce so much insulin over the years that it just can't keep up anymore. On the flip side, we could look at somebody who's younger, who's quite overweight, eating all the junk foods that we all love, that are easy to love, those cakes and cookies and pies and donuts and those kind of things. Well, the more we eat of that refined processed carbohydrate, the more our pancreas has to work. And so we can wear it out really quickly if we have that genetic component towards having type 2 diabetes. Okay, so that's your insulin deficiency, just not producing enough. Let's briefly run through the complications, kind of where the video was going to go. I want to preface this by saying I'm not sharing these complications with you to scare you by any means, because this is the stuff that does get scary for people. A good, healthy fear of the complications that come from diabetes can really motivate us to move forward in our management. But I don't want you to think I'm sharing this just to make you so freaked out that you never eat another carbohydrate ever in your life. That's just not realistic. I just want you to be well informed that uncontrolled diabetes is typically the cause of these. Not just being diagnosed with diabetes. That does not guarantee you these complications. But if we let blood sugars be out of control without any effort on our part to bring them into control, then yes, these are much more likely to happen for you. So first off, uncontrolled diabetes is the leading cause of blindness in the United States, with 12 to 24,000 new cases each year that have been diagnosed. Rates of heart disease. Person with diabetes has 2 to 4 times the risk of heart disease as somebody who does not have any problems with blood sugar control. So that's why the doctor is always really looking at blood pressure and cholesterol levels. He does with all of us, but certainly with somebody with diabetes, that makes it a double whammy. You've got a double risk factor there. Stroke is accounted for in 60% of the diabetes-related death certificates, especially those over age 65. 60 to 70% of the people living with diabetes have some form of nervous system damage. Think of the nerves in the hands and the feet, numbness and tingling. In addition, carpal tunnel is more common in people with diabetes. Also, the nervous system and the digestive tract. Sometimes people have difficulty with the digestion time. They feel very full and bloated after their meal because the stomach doesn't empty properly because of damage to nerves. Again, uncontrolled blood sugars does this. Not just being diagnosed with diabetes. If we can keep you well controlled, you don't have to worry about these kind of things. You can put it off a long time. In addition, 60% of lower limb amputations are related to diabetes. It says here non-traumatic. Non-traumatic simply means you weren't in an accident. Unfortunately, we have to think about you weren't in a war, those kind of things. Those are unrelated to blood sugar control, but that's 60% of non-traumatic lower limb amputations related to diabetes. Kidney failure, very common. Your kidneys are responsible for filtering your blood. All that excess fluid go through your bloodstream, and that depends on healthy blood vessels. Well, if we have a lot of sugar floating through our bloodstream, it's sticky. You know, think about if you get a little sugar on the counter and it gets wet, it gets sticky, right? Or anything. Think of a sucker, how sticky that gets when it's wet. It's the same thing. All that sticky blood flowing through your blood vessels can damage the side of the blood vessel walls. That's what we're trying to avoid. So increased risk for kidney failure as well as heart disease. In addition, for men, 35 to 75% of the men that live with diabetes have some form of sexual dysfunction. I just talked about blood vessels and nerves. What has to be healthy for that to happen? So very, very common. Things that they can do about it. And all these complications, if we don't ignore them and just let them go on forever, even if we maybe had some poor blood sugar control for a time, if we bring it back into control, a lot of those symptoms can diminish or go away completely. It all depends on how long we let it go on for. All right, so your first steps in preventing or delaying that diabetes diagnosis is certainly seeing your physician. I talked about that before. It's very important to see your doctor every 3 to 6 months so that they can check those blood levels and, again, get you the education and training that you need. Your doctor is your partner in all of this. And if you don't feel like your doctor is a partner in all of this with you, then maybe it's time to move on. You really need that doctor to be able to explain to you, what are we looking at, why does it matter, where should my levels be, and what are my goals? Okay, you always want to think of what can I do to change this. 95% of blood sugar control is in your hands. Your doctor only has a piece. All they can do is prescribe. They can tell you what to do, but you still have to do it. And we don't, as adults, we don't like to be told what to do. So I totally get that. That's a hard one for people. But I'll have to say, I get a lot of people that come in to me and they'll just say, tell me what I can and cannot have, and that's what I'll eat. Well, I have a hard time doing that. Usually I won't. But if people are adamant, fine. I'll say, okay, these are your worst of the worst. If you want to give something up, fine, give that up. But reality, we still have to enjoy life. So it's all about a nice balance between the good and the not so good. So seeing your doctor, well, if you're a high achiever, you might have troubles with that. This little guy was always striving for bigger and faster and better and greater, and now all of a sudden he's expected to have lower blood pressure, lower cholesterol, and now all of a sudden we're throwing low blood sugar in amongst it. I thought that's a good twist to look at it that way. Let's talk about the causes. We already talked about the genetic component. Again, something in your genes is triggering your potential to have rising blood sugar levels. We talked about excessive abdominal fat around the midsection, inactivity. Our lifestyles are all about convenience anymore. Everything is convenient. Nobody wants to move. I will try my best not to use the word exercise in my presentation tonight because I know a lot of you are allergic to exercise. Something about it. You just get sick when you start to do it. So we'll think of just movement, all right? Physical activity, just think of it as movement. That's the whole idea. Use those muscles more. Other causes are stress, illness, and inadequate sleep. We're going to definitely address the stress and the inadequate sleep, but we'll show you how that impacts the blood sugar levels. I like to think of it this way. Genetics loads the gun, and environment pulls the trigger. Okay? That's essentially what's going on. You cannot do anything about the genetics. Your environment, your lifestyle is what you can change. Or, modify, tweak a little bit. Change is always a hard word, especially as adults. What do I mean by environment? Well, again, we're hanging out. Physical activity is just not an option. We can't do that. Drive-through, what do we have? Drive-through banks, drive-through pharmacies, drive-through restaurants. I've seen drive-through liquor stores, not here in our area. Down in Florida, that was the thing to have. What else do we have that's drive-through? The banking, yeah. There are some convenience-type stores, yes. Yes, I have seen that too. Absurd. We can't even get out of our car to get our groceries anymore. And I know some of you drive around that parking lot just looking for that closest spot. You're wasting gas, and gas is really expensive. Park far out. Nobody will door ding you. That's the great part. Get a new car. That's what you need to do, because then you will park at the end of the parking lot. It's awesome. It's the best thing to do. You want to be away from people. Take those extra steps. And that, again, I tease about it, but that's more movement in your day. You just took more steps. That can make a big difference. If there's no way you're going to do any physical activity regimen, a set time a day, think of ways that you can get more movement. Sorry, jumping ahead. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Stress, huge. You know, think of our society. Our economy just stresses us out. No job is ever secure anymore. I mean, there's just a lot to be stressed about. We are pushed and pushed and pushed, and that's to our maximum. And then I probably don't need to say a whole lot about the lower right-hand corner of this slide, do I? Other than they are all drive up. Americans are eating more processed, packaged junk food than ever before. And we think that's really contributing to our diabetes rates in our country. Even our state. We are one of the top states for diabetes. That's huge. Something to think about. So, you can't do anything about your family. Genetics is what genetics is. Blame your mom or dad, blame grandma or grandpa, aunt and uncle, whatever. If that helps you to feel good, go ahead and blame. I'm sure this family would like to go back and not wear the little silly hats, but we can control our environment, and that's what we want to focus on tonight. What do I do to prevent or delay that type 2 diabetes diagnosis? Or, again, if you've already been diagnosed, what can I do to improve those numbers overall? Well, weight is in your control. I know a lot of you don't think it is. Most of us don't think it is. Just can't get it, you know. It doesn't go off, or it goes up and down all the time. I don't know what to do. I think we can all pretty much define what makes us gain a little bit more weight than other behaviors. But essentially, we have that control. Physical activity level, again, I hope that you feel like you have some control over that. Stress, let's talk about that. Not that you may be able to control what stresses you out in your life. There are some things in that area that are out of our control, but how we handle it may be in our control. Getting enough sleep and staying physically well overall. So that's going to be the bulk of our presentation from here on out. So, overweight. Do we have some control over that? Remember earlier where I said the bouncer, you know, standing there, that weight around the midsection? Some researchers found, well, not some, most research finds that if a person simply loses 5 to 7% of their current body weight and are physically active 30 minutes a day, at least 5 days a week, they can reduce their risk of type 2 diabetes by 60%. That's huge. That's a very high percentage just in that small amount of weight loss. For a lot of us, we might be thinking, well, I got to lose 30 pounds, I got to lose 50 pounds, I have to lose 100 pounds. We're not talking about that kind of weight here and seeing improvements in blood sugar. If you think about it, I wrote some down. If a 250-pound person loses 12 to 17 pounds, that's 5 to 7% of their weight. Right there, they can diminish their blood sugars, as long as that's combined with the physical activity. Let's say a woman at 150 pounds, it's like 7 to 10 pounds. They lose that, regularly physically active, reduce their risk of type 2 diabetes by 60%. I think that's pretty cool. I hope that that gives you some encouragement and doesn't make you focus on those doom and gloom things. Oh, I'm going to have diabetes. I can't do anything about it. Yes, you can. It's very preventable. And even if the diagnosis does come eventually, it is manageable. Okay? So stress. How do you think stress will affect your blood sugars? Anybody know the stress response in the body? Yes. I was going to ask, anybody ever learned about the fight or flight response to stress? It's so cool. If we actually run or fight. If you think about it, your body's response to either a physical or a psychological or a real threat in your life is to dump adrenaline in your bloodstream to give you the energy to run, and to dump sugar. Remember, all your cells run on sugar for energy. So at that point in time, your body thinks you need tons of energy. So it's going to dump all that excess sugar into your bloodstream. What do we do with stress in our life right now? Eat. Absolutely, because food's comforting, makes us feel better. It'll take that stress away. It doesn't, does it? We sit and stew, and usually we're eating along with it. So we didn't run from our stress, and hopefully y'all didn't physically fight that person that was making you mad, family member, coworker. Okay, not cool, no fighting. Even though I want you to burn up that sugar, I would prefer that you went for a walk or rode a bike or whatever. Call a friend just to calm yourself down. But we don't burn up all of those hormones that are kicked out into our bloodstream and the sugar. And then we sit down and eat. So now we've already got high blood sugars because of the body's response to stress, and now we're bringing more sugar in. And guess what kind of foods we crave when we're under stress? Junk foods. And most of our junk foods have carbohydrate involved. Carbohydrate is the nutrient you eat from your food that becomes sugar, and that's what flour and sugar is in our cakes and our cookies and our pies and our donuts, and maybe it's pizza. Again, it might be a salty food or a sweet food that you crave. Stress makes us crave more of that kind of fun food. In addition, the other response in the stressful times is, of course, all that we just ate and all that sugar we didn't burn is going to be stored as fat. Okay, that's your storage form of excess calories, is fat. Guess where that fat's going to go during stressful times? Is it going to go down here? Right in the middle. You've heard that before, that cortisol reaction, that stress makes us gain weight around our midsection. Well, great. What did we just learn about fat around the midsection? It's the fat that impacts the blood sugar the greatest. So we need to go out from here and never have any stress ever again. Okay. And if you can do that, come back and tell me how you did it, because I work for the Center for Good Health. I need to let everybody know. Not easy. So, sleeping well. In addition, lack of sleep has been shown to decrease the effectiveness of our insulin. So again, our keys do not work. How many hours of sleep a night do you feel like you need? What's your magic number?
7.
How much? 3. Oh my gosh. I would be dead. You're young, aren't you? I used to live on 4. I remember that. It didn't happen anymore. Do you physically feel well? You can do all the... Okay, thank you. She doesn't feel well at 3 hours of sleep. How many do you feel?
I usually about 7.
7. Mm-hmm. Anybody else find their magic number? How much they need? Researchers say 7 to 9. Now, I have seen people that function very well and are very healthy on 6 or so. But typically, in general, they say 7 to 9 hours of sleep is what we need. And if we're not getting that, we are affecting the body's response to insulin. In addition, when you don't get enough sleep, what do you crave? Enough said. Caffeine, yeah, definitely. Most definitely. So let's look at some change tactics. Hopefully you're all here tonight because you want to learn what is my next step. What do I do to prevent or delay that diagnosis of diabetes? Well, let's first look at a little a study that was done. At the bottom you see Diabetes Prevention Program. This was a multi-center study that they did on with clients with pre-diabetes. A large group of people were assigned to different groups, and they measured the difference between treating someone with medication and a little information, just giving them information about diet and exercise. The lifestyle modification group was an intensive lifestyle training program where they had health coaches that told them how to eat right, coached them along and found their barriers and how to train them to get beyond those barriers. The physical activity end of things, there was no medication in this group. So it's either medication, just a little information about diet and exercise, or an intensive lifestyle training program or coaching program. What they found that was both of them worked very well in bringing down blood sugars and preventing the movement of that pre-diabetes to the type 2 diabetes diagnosis, but the lifestyle intervention group was statistically significantly more effective. So that's pretty cool. That's why we're here talking about lifestyle modification. What they found is it reduced the risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 49%, with weight loss being the predominant marker. And notice 16% reduction in risk with every 2 pounds of weight that was lost. Again, these people aimed for that 5 to 7% of weight loss and maintaining that, and that physical activity level of 5 days a week for 30 minutes. That's what their lifestyle intervention was. That's the primary part of it. They got their weight loss. They had 16% reduction in every 2 pounds. So when you lose 2 pounds and you think it's nothing, it could very well be a significant impact on your blood sugar control. In addition, achieving exercise goals, even without weight loss, contributed to a significant reduction in the risk for type 2 diabetes. So again, if you are doing everything you can do with physical activity and diet, and you're not seeing the scale come down the way you'd like it to, it does not mean your efforts have failed you. Keep it up. I want to encourage you, and hopefully you just physically and mentally feel better doing it anyway, that it won't really matter. We've got to get our minds off that number on the scale. Yes, we talked about that 5 to 7% and what that meant, but really, how many of us would be happy with a 10, 12 pound weight loss? Some of us want a whole lot more. We've got to learn that that little bit of weight loss makes a huge difference in our overall health. And not only with diabetes and pre-diabetes, but with cholesterol and blood pressure as well. A lot of people will go off some of their blood pressure medicine with a small drop in their weight. All right, so what is lifestyle modification? We're talking about eating well, moving more, unwinding, and sleeping well. Easy enough, right? Just go do it. Well, I wouldn't have a job if it was that easy. So let's look at it. Let's talk about good, solid nutrition. Eating well, to me, is just about getting back to the basics. Think about years ago when your mom or dad or grandma or grandpa used to make meals. It actually took some time. It was natural food. It didn't come in a box, a bag, or a can, for that matter. Natural food, eating food in its most natural state. That doesn't mean you can't cook something. I don't mean the raw foods diet necessarily. But eating foods in the way that it was meant to be consumed. Less processed and refined. And I'll try to define what that means in each of the different food groups so that you understand fully all food groups. We can think of whole foods. Whole foods, we often think just fruits and vegetables, or whole grains maybe. But you got to look at the dairy products and the meat products as well. You can eat refined, processed foods in those departments also. When you're putting together your meals, I encourage you to think of balanced meals. And that's, most of us remember mom cooking balanced meals. That was where you had different types of foods at the same meal. And most importantly, you're getting some protein, whole grains, and fruits and vegetables at each of your meals. Now, I'll give you, breakfast is probably not that complex. Can be eaten on the run out the door, grabbing a peanut butter wrap or something like that, where it's not maybe as fully balanced, but at least your lunch and your evening meal is more balanced. This particular meal, we've got the protein from the fish, whole grains from the brown rice, and then notice that half of the plate is filled with vegetables. How many of you fill half of your plate at lunch and dinner with vegetables? Really? None of you. I'm not surprised. Well, I shouldn't say none of you. Probably some of you are going, yeah, I do pretty good on that. I think that's where we as Americans are failing the most in our diets. We are not getting those fruits and vegetables in on a regular basis. It used to be the old 5-a-day campaign. Oftentimes you'll hear, no, we need to be eating 9 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. That takes some thought and some effort, most certainly, but it can be done. In addition, I like to think of variety not only in food groups. You can think of your whole diet, but think of variety within the group. So maybe don't just eat salmon every single day of the week, but you have a variety of different types of fish and meat in that diet. Your whole grains, there's variety in different types of grains that you eat, which is usually pretty easy for most of us. Same thing with vegetables and fruits. And I often would get people that they hate vegetables, but they love fruits. Well, they're similar nutrient value, so that's great, but you just got to be a little bit more careful because the fruit is natural sugar. You could overdo that easier than you can overdo your vegetables, by all means. But fill half that plate with fruits and vegetables. Good, healthy recommendation for all of us. Also, make sure that you're getting a variety of textures and maybe even temperature at your meal as well. We all know that taste is satisfying, and that's what we look at with our meals. Wow, was it a satisfying meal? Well, yeah, it was good because it turned out well, the recipe was good, I like these foods. But also, don't forget the value of texture. If you have a meal that's maybe salmon with mashed potatoes and cooked cauliflower till it's mush, and then maybe you cook those greens until they were so wilted they had no zip to them at all, it's all mush. You're going to walk away from that meal more than likely being dissatisfied. You're going to be looking for crunch. And that's where that cookie in that cookie jar is going to look pretty darn good if it's a crunchy one. Okay, so think variety, balance in texture, temperature, taste, and the different food groups. You've all heard this before. This is nothing new, right? We need to be choosing more whole grains. Why are whole grains important? What are whole grains high in? Exactly. The fiber, your body has to work harder to digest that fiber. So it slows down the digestive tract. So the sugar, the natural sugar that's in bread, the flour becomes sugar when you eat it. It goes into the bloodstream at a much slower pace, so you get a slower rise in blood sugar level. When you eat white refined products, whether it be breads or cereals or rice or pasta or crackers or pancakes or waffles that are white refined, you start to digest that pretty much in your mouth. And by the time it hits your belly, there's not a lot of work that has to go on. So it spikes your blood sugar, and your pancreas dumps a whole bunch of insulin in and drops your blood sugar quick. You have prediabetes, so it's not to a dangerous level. That's not the issue. But what happens when you get down here? Blood sugar spikes and then it drops.
You want something sweet and bring it.
Absolutely. You want more sugar, so bring me on more carbs. I need another pancake. Great. So think of whole grains as high fiber, and make sure you look at the first ingredient on your ingredient list. Don't be deceived by multigrain, 9-grain, wheat bread. It's all wheat, folks. It's all made from grains. It doesn't mean it's a whole grain. So first ingredient on the ingredient list should be either 100% whole wheat or whatever type of grain it is, or whole grain wheat. Okay? Used to be that you could just look at the fiber content, and man, if it had like 5 grams of fiber, it was fine. That's not true, because we could refine one grain and take the fiber out of it and put it into another one and say, oh, now that's a whole grain. Well, not really. We'll look at the grain kernel here in a second. Benefits: lowers your risk for heart disease and stroke, lowers your cholesterol levels, sugar levels, lowers your insulin levels, which means we're not overtaxing the pancreas, lowers inflammation in the circulatory system, which is always good. There's a whole host of disorders that are linked to inflammation, including heart disease. Quick, sustained energy. That's the thing we want. Yes, we digest it. It gets to be sugar, but then it holds us there. We want that level blood sugar level. It feels better when your blood sugars are level. In addition, higher phytochemicals, vitamins, and minerals, and this is why. This is a picture of an actual grain kernel. The outside is the bran. That's the hard shell of your grain kernel. What do we get from bran? Fiber. That's the fiber in your food, is bran. Then you have that creamy yellow stuff in the center called the endosperm. What do you think that is? What's creamy white? White bread, white pasta, white crackers, whatever is white, that's starch. Absolutely. And then you have the germ in the lower right there. That's the nutrition powerhouse of your grain kernel. That's where you get the vitamins, the minerals, the antioxidants, which are plant chemicals that help you fight disease, including diabetes. You also get a little bit of protein. Protein foods are more aptly to be called your animal products, your meat, your fish, your seafood, eggs, cheese. We'll look at those in a second. But you do get protein from your grain foods as well. So nutrition powerhouse. Guess what happens with that in a refined grain? It's gone. Throw it away. They are required by law just to take 3 of those vitamins and put them back in. Whether they do or not, I once had somebody that was had worked for a food manufacturer, and they just kind of laughed. Yeah, like we do that. Thinking, oh my gosh, thought you were required by law to put those vitamins and minerals back in. Well, no, they didn't. So when you refine it, you remove the bran, so out goes the fiber. You remove the germ, that out goes most of all the good, healthy nutrients that our bodies need to help to fight disease. You get the endosperm, which is the starch. That's what you're eating. Now the recommendation is to make at least half of your grains in your diet whole grains. So if you're not there yet, that's a great place to start. Maybe you like a whole grain bread, but you hate whole wheat pasta. Or you like whole grain breads and you like the pasta, but you don't like the rice. You mix it up a little bit so you're getting some whole grains. Okay? I encourage you to try some new whole grains. Quinoa is my favorite one that I've tried over the past year. It is so quick and easy to cook, and oh my gosh, it's good stuff. Quinoa. It's Quinoa. And I'll tell you, I know a lot of people love to have recipes at these kind of events. I have some. If y'all want some, let me know. But go on the internet. If you have access to the internet, you put in healthy bean recipes, healthy quinoa recipes, whatever. Always preface it with a healthy. You won't always get everything that's healthy, but there are so many recipes out there. Buy a vegetarian cookbook is another great way. Not that you have to be vegetarian, I don't mean that, but it's a great way to figure out, how do I add more whole grains into my diet? How do I add more fruits and vegetable? The best thing, I had some coworkers years ago, I think it was by graduation from my undergrad, and they bought me 2 vegetarian cookbooks. Best thing they could have ever done for me. It was perfect. Because same thing, I wasn't a great vegetable lover. I mean, I liked them, but taking the time to prepare them, no, not really. Fruit, that's easy. That's kind of, original fast food. So, yes?
Low glycemic, things that we pre-diabetics need to think about?
Yep, good question. She asked about low glycemic index. That's a theory that certain foods digest more slowly than others, so when we combine them, we have less of a glycemic load, less of a high blood sugar, and that's very, very true. I don't typically teach that because, unfortunately, if you look at a list, you'll find like a Snickers bar is really low glycemic index because of the fat. Because it slows digestion down too. So it's kind of, you're kind of leery to tell, you're all going to go buy a Snickers bar. I don't know that candy bar in particular is low. But, you kind of have to look at it and go, okay, wait a minute, let's get some solid nutrition. But this is where the whole grains, again, are lower glycemic index because of the slow digestion. That's exactly what we're talking about, is how high will my blood sugar go after eating a whole grain bread versus a white refined. Yep, exactly. And that's what we're talking about, whole foods. All right, let's move on to those proteins. Protein foods are mostly animal, not all, but mostly animals. Your fish, seafood, meat, poultry, eggs, cheese, and then I'm going to throw in, you got nuts up there in the top, beans. Beans are high in carbohydrates, so they're often included in the carbohydrate list, but they're also very high in protein as well. We typically, as Americans, don't have problems eating enough animal protein. So you don't have to go out here thinking, okay, I need to go eat more meat. No. What's that? Yes, exactly. Our goal with the meat, again, not that you have to give it all up, there are vegetarians that do wonderfully with blood sugar control, but I also have vegetarians who do poorly with blood sugar control because French fries and cookies and cakes and pies can be made vegetarian as well. So, you really have to do it well, but you can get good blood sugar control because typically you're consuming less fat and saturated fat in the diet. And that's why we're recommending less red meat, more white meat, poultry, turkey, fish, seafood, because of the fat content. Okay? You have much more saturated fat in your red meats than you do your other styles of meats. And on your handouts, I skipped the 10 steps because it's kind of a summary of everything, but your next list should be what I call the exchange list for meat and meat substitutes. And what this does is it shows you, one quick page, which ones of your animal proteins, and there are some plant ones on here as well, which are very lean and lean, meaning they are lower fat. Then you can determine how many medium fat meats and how many high fat meats am I consuming. Okay, so your first 2 columns is where you want to be choosing your animal proteins most often. Saturated fat in the diet is what can make your insulin less effective. So if we can keep these 2 columns low, we're going to overall keep our saturated fat intake lower. What's nice nowadays is even your meats in your grocery store have labels on them. Do some comparisons. And I encourage you, don't be fooled by turkey. Do some comparisons. Make sure you are truly getting a leaner cut of meat. Because if they grind white meat, dark meat, and the skin together, you can have just as much fat and cholesterol as some of your beef products. And you're going to pay a whole lot more for it. Not that turkey isn't a better option, but you have to make sure that the product that you're consuming is truly a better option. Okay? All right, so that'll give you some guidance when you're looking at those animal proteins, which ones are you going to choose? Notice on the far right, there's all your processed meats. I encourage you to avoid them as much as possible. I don't typically tell people not to eat something, but processing of meat means a lot of saturated fat and a lot of sodium. Sodium, what's that linked to? What do we all know sodium will do in our body? Kidneys, high blood pressure. It's affecting your kidneys because of the high blood pressure. In addition, they find can be related to blood sugar control. Our high sodium diets, our low potassium diets, that's also a factor in diabetes as well. So another great reason to just kind of avoid those processed meats. Yeah?
So I see peanut butter in the high fat.
Yes. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Almond butter.
I would say any type of nut butter, even though it's over there in the high fat. If we're working on weight control, we really have to watch our portions, but the type of fat that's in any nut butter is a very healthy fat compared to these others. And in a minute, I'll also show you when we look at fats, we'll look at where the nut butters will fall into. So you bet, almond butter, peanut butter, soy nut butter, yes.
You got hot dogs in both.
Yes, but notice,
What's the difference?
but notice, look at the amount of fat that's in the hot dog on the, was it first or second column? First column?
Second column.
Less than 1 gram of fat per ounce. Anybody even eaten a hot dog with less than 1 gram of fat per ounce? Hot dogs are usually like 16 grams of fat. So it's specifying the amount of fat that's in that type of hot dog. I'm glad you asked that. So the hot dog that are on those first two lists are specifically brands that have less than 3 grams of fat per ounce.
Do you have a name brand
I was gonna say,
I-
do you know that?
I don't. What was?
Ballpark, correct?
No, definitely not. It's definitely going to be a turkey. You're not going to find it in an all beef.
It's good turkey and chicken over on the far right, too. So,
Right. But you have to look at what kind is it. That's the thing. You can't just put turkey in one column. It's what kind of turkey are we talking about. There in the market, you'll find ground turkey, lean ground turkey, and very lean ground turkey. Ground turkey is where that's the dark meat, white meat, and the skin ground in. If it's lean, it's the white meat and the dark meat only, no skin. If it's very lean, you're just getting ground turkey breast. Then you have to be a little creative in what you do with it. Okay? So yeah, when you look at these, you qualify what kind of turkey are we talking about? How much fat is in that hot dog? Okay? Good questions. Yes?
I guess I'm really confused about that peanut butter because I have a tablespoon of peanut butter every single day and they break respectively. To help my blood sugar.
Yep.
And you're saying don't do it.
No, I'm not. I didn't say that. Not with the peanut butter, because we're going to look at plant-based proteins next. Okay? And we'll get into the fat category, and I'll tell you which types of fats are best. Okay? We're going to take just a short little break so we can do a switch of our tape in our video recorder there. Pardon? Yes?
Appointments with you if they need individualized,
Yeah.
how do we do that?
Absolutely. The question was, can we set individual appointments with an educator? Absolutely. If you have diabetes already, your insurance companies typically cover diabetes education every single year. If you're pre-diabetic, again, most insurance companies are not covering, but I don't want to say all of them. So I would encourage you to find out the codes that we bill, your diagnosis code, and call your insurance company and ask about your coverage. Because more and more of them, I think, are going to start to get more proactive in training people to prevent. Here at the Center for Good Health, we even have coaching where you can meet with us for 30 minutes, 3 different times. Oftentimes it ends up to be the hour the first time and a half-hour follow-up, just in coaching that you would pay out of pocket. We could do that as well. So there's options for education out there, definitely. And that's where the coaching comes in. Please don't let me forget, and I'll hold you accountable. Remind me at the end. I want to tell you more about that diabetes prevention program that I told you about, where they showed that these lifestyle interventions are effective. You all are this close to having an opportunity to do that same type of program right here. Okay, free to you. So don't let me forget, I'll tell you more about that. Yes?
Applegate uncured turkey dogs, a 3.5.
Turkey dogs, yes. And I'm glad you mentioned the Applegate brand. When I talked about the processing, sodium nitrate is a preservative that's put in the food that is said to be potentially linked to cancer. The Applegate brand is uncured. Hormel has an uncured brand out there. It's technically not uncured. It's just naturally cured with celery juice versus the man-made sodium nitrite. So that's an option. But yeah, check for Hormel and Applegate. You might have to go to a health food store to find those very, very low-fat type options, and especially the uncured. But I do know Myers has the Hormel, and Myers also has another brand that's the uncured type of processed meat.
Vegetarian ones.
Vegetarian ones, so probably soy protein in it, more than likely.
Like smart tofu in one of them. 2.5.
Give it a try. See what you think.
0 in the light.
You know, then you got to wonder, what am I eating? No. But then again, you eat a hot dog, you got to wonder what you're eating too. Yeah. No, it's not worth it. Maybe once during the summer on the grill, you know, it's kind of fun. You got to, you know, do that little ballpark frank. But it should not be a regular part of our diet. That's the whole idea. And that's where things get us into trouble, when we're doing that junky type food over and over and over again. Not that just we eat it, you know, once in a while. That's moderation. All right, choosing more plant-based protein. The best way to do this is starting with your legumes. Beans, nuts, seeds. Your beans like kidney, garbanzo, navy, pinto, black, Great Northern. They have the same amount of protein as your meat, poultry, and fish, but they have the fiber, which meat, poultry, and fish does not have, and it has none of the fat unless you added to it. Okay? Very high fiber, very high protein, so that's a fullness factor for you right there. When you want to feel full and satisfied with your meals, you're going for fiber and protein because it takes longer for your body to digest. In addition, when you're choosing, more nuts and seeds, you are getting, again, the fiber, the antioxidants. And what did I say antioxidants help you to do? Kind of said it in passing, so maybe you didn't catch it. These are the plant nutrients that help you to fight disease. And diabetes is one of them.
Are pistachios good enough then?
Yep, I would say so. Probably the two that really get the most accolade nowadays are your walnuts and your almonds. Those are the two that have, you know, not that they're all not good, but the nutrition powerhouse is in those two. We do have to, right, we still have to watch. And you know what's nice about pistachios? And the amount of fat, when you compare that to like walnuts, you get to eat a whole lot more pistachios than you do walnuts.
You can only eat 24 a day.
Really?
Pistachios.
Oh, I think like 63 was only like
Really?
100 calories, something like that. That's a lot of popping, so.
Shell already out, you know, you're burning calories.
Yeah, exactly. Trust me, if you got to hammer those open, they're not easy to open.
What about for those of us that are allergic to nuts?
Yes, and that's where you go towards the beans. If you're allergic to nuts, absolutely, you have to stay away from them. What about seeds, like sunflower seeds? Again, still we're talking high fat. So if we're working on weight control, we still have to watch the portion just because of calories. But they are, you know, definitely where you're getting the better type of fat. Anybody ever heard of MUFAs and PUFAs? Your monounsaturated fatty acids and your polyunsaturated fatty acids. That's where you're getting into the good fat. So yes, on your protein list, peanut butter was over there because it was high fat, but it does not correlate in the type of fat to any of the other things on that list. You would not want to associate a nut butter, a healthy nut butter, with those processed salami and hot dogs and brats and things like that. The type of fat that are in your nut butters are the healthy types of fats. In addition, plant sterols. What does that second word look like? Right, well, it does. Shoot, sorry. Let's try one more. Cholesterol. The end word of cholesterol, this is a plant sterol that will compete for binding in your body. So if the plant sterol gets bound, your cholesterol does not get bound and it will go out of your body. That's what we want to happen. The cholesterol that you eat or you naturally produce, you just want it to get out of your body, and plant sterols will help with that. That's one other advantage of nuts and seeds. Moving on to fruits and vegetables, definitely nutrient dense. You either have food in your diet that are nutrient dense or calorically dense. Which one sounds better? Nutrient dense, absolutely. So for the volume of food that you're consuming, you're getting way more nutrients than you are calories. High vitamins and minerals goes without saying. We talked about antioxidants, again, plant chemicals, so our fruits and vegetables are very high in plant chemicals. In addition, they're high in fiber. You know, we talked about high sodium diets, low potassium diets. Well, if we ate more fresh fruits and vegetables, we could reverse that and be low sodium, high potassium, which for the most of us is just fine. Think of your fruits as your original sweet treat and really your original fast food. You peel a banana, you eat it. How much quicker can that be? You wash up an orange, you peel it. You scrub an apple, you eat it. It's pretty quick. And we're all about convenience, right? We looked at all the drive-thrus. Well, you know, bring some fruit along with you. Really quick and easy to consume. Enjoy fruits on your, I'm moving on one extra slide. Enjoy the fresh, frozen, or dried fruits. Be cautious a little bit with your frozen and your drieds. They can add a fair amount of sugar to both of them. So really read your label, especially, well, I'd say most of the dried fruit as well as the frozen.
Why does frozen have more sugar?
Why does frozen have more sugar? Only when they add it to it.
Oh,
and if you look, a lot of strawberries frozen, they add sugar to it.
Yeah.
Why? Strawberries are naturally sweet. You know, it depends on when they're picked. He whispers, taste better.
Pick 'em early and
Yeah, they're too early, and they need to add it.
But if I'm freezing my own.
Absolutely. No, there's no change. Absolutely. And that's what I encourage you, especially with blueberries. You have some awesome blueberries around here.
I think if you talk the freezing of strawberries built this ice, the sugar draws the juices out. It's essential for the freezing process.
True. But again, you can freeze your own natural strawberries with no reason to add sugar to it. Pardon me? You're just looking for excuses. Okay, well, you know. But really, and that's the thing, when we go towards more whole foods and we change our taste buds, we start to enjoy the natural taste of our fruits and vegetables without all that salt and sweet juices that we add to it. You just learn to love the natural taste of food the way it was intended to be eaten. Enjoy fruit on salads. Salad is not iceberg lettuce and dressing. Okay, I'm grateful to at least our restaurants for recreating our salads. They've really done a good job of getting some nice greens in there and all the different types of fruits and vegetables you can add to the salads as well as the healthy nuts. So they've done good for us in that sense. Top pancakes or cereal if you're eating that with fruit rather than using all that syrupy sugar. Enjoy fruit as dessert. Again, original sweet treat. Vegetables, I love vegetables because they are your lowest calorie food. And you talk about wanting to be full at a meal, you can eat a whole lot of veggies. And their fiber and their water content will definitely fill you up. 25 calories in a cup of raw veggies. Think about, I don't know, Big Mac, probably 500-600 calories. Think how many vegetables you could eat for the calories in a Big Mac. Huge. Your salads, again, they're not just your basic salads anymore. Be creative, make it colorful, make it different textures, make it different sweetness. Adding fruit is the best thing I think we ever did to salads. You can do that and not even need any dressing on there because all the different flavors and textures. Wraps, another great way to get your veggies in. I don't know, years ago I was eating bagels and I would make bagel sandwiches with vegetables. They were falling all over the place. I'm like, thank you for creating wraps. So much easier to eat. But you know, you just basically are having a salad on the go, is what you do with those wraps. Stir fries, those are endless possibilities and what vegetables you put in stir fries. Roasted vegetables are my new favorite as well. You make it different every time you make it. It looks different every time you make it. And great flavor without a lot of additives. You know, you put a little bit of oil in with them. You don't need a lot because that oil spreads far. And a very little salt and pepper. It's amazing how far it'll go. And again, you may not even need the salt. You can try it without the salt first. See what you think. Soups, again, go for those vegetarian cookbooks. You'd be amazed what they'll do with their vegetables. Got lots of ideas out there. And even your standard recipes right now that you have for your soups, add more vegetables to it. If it's got enough broth in there to take some more veggies, then be creative. Add some more. Or add different ones in there to make it different. Burritos or bean tacos, great way to eliminate the meat. Think of the Meatless Monday campaign. Make your Mondays meatless. Now you're forced to add more fruits and veggies in your diet so you can get filled up that day. All right, on to the dairy products. Again, this is another area we can get stuck with our saturated fat content. Again, where did we get red meat but our cows? You're talking to a dairy farmer's daughter here, so I hate to admit it, but yes, a lot of our dairy products are going to be high in saturated fat content. And that's what gets us. So we really have no reason to be drinking whole milk anymore. So this is where I'll scold you and say get yourself down to that 1% or skim. Even if you have to take steps, that's where most people, make those changes. But 1% or skim milk is your best choice. Hard to find that in some of the cheeses, so you're going to go for a reduced fat cheese, probably made from the 2% milk. You can find some part skim cheeses that are out there. When I talk about natural cheese versus processed cheese, the natural cheese is going to be more in the deli section, and it might be a little harder to find a reduced fat there. But sometimes if you choose the whole full fat cheese, you're eating less of it because it has a real rich flavor. And then you get to decide how thin you slice that cheese. I always tell people when they went to Subway, I always ask, can you taste the cheese on your sub? A lot of people say no, unless you're choosing like a pepper jack and you really notice that peppery flavor. But for the most part, you can't even taste the cheese. Why are we putting it on there? Leave it off. Some cheeses, it's 100 calories. I think there it's only like 60 or 80 because it's such a thin little slice. But still, anywhere you can boot out 60 or 80 calories, it's a good thing. So think about that when you're making your dishes. What am I adding to this, and is it really impacting the flavor of that dish? Or again, you're talking about being allergic to nuts. Some people might be intolerant of dairy products, have a lactose intolerance. There's another word for you with the OSE on the end. People who are lactose intolerant cannot tolerate the natural sugar in milk. That's why they can't drink it. They get digestive tract issues. So you might do like a dairy alternative, almond milk or rice milk or soy milk. Those are typically, depending on what kind you buy, typically going to be lower in overall carbohydrate than your milk is going to be. Milk does have carbohydrate. And that's one thing that really trips people up. They think protein, which absolutely it does have protein too. But if you're guzzling milk day in and day out, you may want to reconsider and bring that intake down because that's natural sugar you're consuming. And even natural sugar is obviously going to spike the blood sugar. All right, on to the fats then. Think of fat as everything you spread on or pour over. Okay, wouldn't you agree? Margarines and butters and oils and sour cream, cream cheese. Think of the word cream. That's the fat that we skim off the top of the milk. So, of course, anything with cream in it is going to be fat. Now, bacon is the only one you really don't spread, but sorry, bacon is not a protein, folks. It does not fit in your protein category. There's very little protein left there. So, and then again, there's our nuts in that fat category. Your handout next should be, and I apologize, this is something I often use for people with cholesterol issues, but I love the handout, so I just continue to use it for everything. I really should probably retype it. I've been using it for so many years, though. But what it lists for you is the food sources of cholesterol, the food sources of saturated and trans fats, and then the food sources for unsaturated and, or unsaturated, I should say, but the polys and the monos that we talked about. Those are your MUFAs and PUFAs. Okay, so of course over here on the left, or the right-hand column, that's the column we want you to choose your fats from most often. Those are your healthy fats that do not necessarily raise your cholesterol levels to unhealthy levels. In addition, they have not been correlated to affecting your insulin function. Not that if we go excess, it's not going to be a problem, but still, it's much better than these two unhealthy fats in that first column. Cottage cheese would probably, it'll be within your saturated fat column. Now, of course, there are reduced fat cottage cheeses and fat-free cottage cheeses. It is included in the protein category because it's a dairy product with high protein. But as far as the type of fat, it's going to be in with the animal products because you've got your whole milk and 2% milk, and that's what cheese is made from. And I do want to, just as an added note, You know you have a list with cholesterol. We're not really emphasizing cholesterol tonight, but you've got your cholesterol and then your saturated fat column. Cover up the bottom half of your second column. What do you notice about the first two columns? They're identical. So where you get cholesterol, you also get saturated fat. And both high intake of cholesterol and high intake of saturated fat is sending your LDL cholesterol up. So you can kind of look at those foods and say, yep, we're getting a double whammy there because of high cholesterol and high fat. So again, on the right, your bottom list of monounsaturated fatty acids is where you're finding all those nuts that we talked about. Keep it in portion control. It's healthy, yes, but still going to be very high calorie. They usually say about an ounce of nuts a day, which is the palm of the hands with the fingers covered. Not like this. Okay? And don't have that canister. Yeah, exactly. I know. I once had a gentleman that came into me, it was just recently, he said, yeah, my doctor told me, I can't remember what food it was, but he said, whatever I eat, it shouldn't be more than the palm of my hand. I thought, oh, doc, you have no idea what you just did to that guy. You know, it was chips. Whatever he could reach in and grab was what he was going to consume. And I looked at him and I said, oh, I can only imagine how you're reaching in there and doing this little thing, pulling out. But it was working for him. So whatever works, that's the idea. Portion control.
On this chart, though,
Yes.
I'm going to quibble with you. On this chart, the first two columns are food.
Mm-hmm.
The next column is oil. They're not, there's no third column substitute for ice cream.
Right. Because there is no substitute for ice cream. That's where it's just showing you where are we getting the vast majority of fat and cholesterol from in the diet. Absolutely. And again,
I understand that for breakfast we're not going to go scramble some sesame oil.
exactly. But what you might do is put canola oil in the pan versus butter to fry the egg. Like that. Yeah. And that's the substitution part of it. Wherever you can substitute the healthy oils for the solid fats like shortening and butter, that's going to help you to improve your overall cholesterol levels and blood sugar control. Fat for fat. Pardon me?
Butter better than margarine for you?
That's a good question. Absolutely. We're getting into a whole nutrition class here. We're going to have to book it along here. Butter versus margarine debate. If the margarine does not have partially hydrogenated oil on the ingredient list and it uses these healthier oils, I would say it's still a better option. There's a lot of people that will disagree with me with that just because of all the additives. Okay? That is to be your choice. If you're not using a ton of butter, you're not eating butter on a daily basis, and you want to stick to butter, absolutely. Whip it up, though. Put some air into that so you're just using less. It is still high saturated fat.
On the third column, the top part is no better or worse than the bottom part, is it?
I would say the monounsaturated fats on your list are your best. Your polyunsaturated are your second best. But still, again, very, very healthy oils. So that whole column, I would say, when you're choosing those over the others, much better option. All right, trans fats are ones you absolutely want to avoid. If you see on your not ingredient list, your nutrition facts panel on a package, if you see any number behind the words trans fat, I encourage you to get rid of it completely. Find another product that does not have it in it. The trans fats are the ones that raise your bad cholesterol and lower your good. You never want to do both of those. Okay? So that is what makes the trans fat say avoid. All right, definitely skipping sugary drinks. Obvious reasons. It's liquid calories and it's liquid sugar that's going to spike your blood sugar real quick. A couple of research studies to share with you. One found that women who drank one or more sweetened beverages a day had an increased risk of 83% for developing type 2 diabetes. Another study showed that 2 or more servings of fruit drinks a day, could be 100% fruit juice, 31% higher risk of type 2 diabetes. Liquid. Your belly doesn't have to work very hard to get that into the system, so it spikes the blood sugar very quickly. Water is always best. Just a little healthy nutrition overview to move on to the physical activity section here, but I encourage you to forget about dieting. Dieting just has a connotation of deprivation and, we all go kicking our heels, not wanting to get into dieting per se or deprivation. Think of 80-20. 80% of the foods that you consume on a regular basis are the good, whole, natural foods that your body needs to function well. The 20% is the, I like this, the easy to love kind of foods. Plan your meals and shop with a list. That will really help you to practice some of these behaviors that we talked about and getting more fruits and vegetables in your diet. That does take some planning. But the more you do that, the easier it gets. When you first start to do it, it's kind of a job. After that, it's no hat. You just do it. It's part of your lifestyle. Make small, sustainable changes. Again, if some people do really well overhauling their entire lifestyle all at once to say, this is enough. I am going to stop this diabetes in its tracks. Fantastic. If you're that person, you can just really make drastic changes and keep that up for a lifetime. Fantastic. Some people do well. Most of us need to make little changes, get those down, practice them, and then move on to another change. Okay, so you decide what's best for you. All right, let's talk about getting active here a little bit more. Physical activity reduces your risk of obesity, high blood pressure, heart disease and stroke, which goes along with blood pressure, diabetes, osteoporosis, cancers, anxiety, and depression. Okay, we've already talked about the first four there. We're all talking about weight and blood pressure and cholesterol and heart disease risk, as well as diabetes. That's why we're here. Other benefits of physical activity is improving your body's use of insulin. When you are physically active, think of your, the benefit is you just gave yourself a shot of insulin. And I have people with diabetes that I don't even have to tell them. They come in and say, yeah, I notice when I do my walking, my blood sugar is well controlled. If I don't do my walking or whatever it is, blood sugars go up. You just give yourself a shot of insulin when you're out there doing physical activity. Could be, shoveling snow, could be cleaning the garage, cleaning the house, scrubbing the floors, whatever. Walking the mall, you name it. Burns excess body fat. Well, we all want to do that because we don't want to store what we kind of splurged on. Improves muscle strength and bone density. Very, very important as we get older. Huge. Want to maintain our independence. Lowers your blood pressure, lowers your cholesterol levels. Again, those are your risk factors for heart disease. Increases energy levels. I love when somebody comes in and tells me I'm too tired to exercise. I go, no, you got it backwards. You are too tired because you don't exercise. And that is very true. The only way you're going to get any energy is through physical activity. Okay? If you're sitting around all day, your body's not going to need any energy. It has no reason to move and get zipped up. You got to kick it in the butt. And then reducing stress. Absolutely. Fight or flight. When you're physically active, you're burning up, you're running from the stress, or you're fighting the stress. And again, that could be doing things, projects around the house. So let me ask you this. Given that whole list, is there any reason we shouldn't be physically active? I knew somebody'd have to have it. Previous injuries is definitely a reason not to be physically active, but most people have something they could do. It could be chair exercises. Some of the things I mentioned maybe you can't do physically. Swimming and chair exercises are probably, most people are capable of doing those kind of things if they have access to those types of programs. But you're right. There's always one in the crowd that has an excuse, I'm teasing you. I always get somebody. But it's true, some people do have health limitations. And she's saying it's tough to exercise after you've been on your feet all day long. I just had a client here today, same thing. That's where you have to be creative and think, okay, I am moving around all day long. Is there a time where for 5 minutes I could move sustained? Because some people it's move here, they're standing on their feet, it's just small movements throughout the entire day. Is there a time where for 5 or 10 minutes you can go for a sustained amount of time moving physically? Maybe it's more, again, chair exercises, or you do something with your upper body now that you're on your feet all day. Or days when you're off, you're physically active those days, and not necessarily during the work days. The buddy system is huge when we're talking about healthy lifestyle changes. To have somebody else that's trying to do the same thing, no matter their reasoning, it may not be blood sugar control, Buddy system is huge. Yeah, very much so. All right, let's move on.
Are you making any distinction between anaerobic and aerobic exercise?
We're going to get into that real quickly here, just for a second. I do want to clarify, we do need a doctor's clearance. I don't want to tell you all that you all should be physically active if you do have medical reasons that you shouldn't be. So get clearance from your doctor first. Not too many doctors that won't give you that medical clearance. I do believe physical activity puts you in the healthy mindset. When you're less active, you're going to crave junk food. You're going to eat more junk food. But when you're physically active, you kind of don't want to sabotage all your efforts by going and eat something that you know you didn't burn off. You didn't work that long to be able to have that hot fudge brownie sundae or whatever it might be. The guidelines are, we talked about it before, the 30 minutes most days of the week. And what they found in that diabetes prevention program was at least minimum of 5 days a week, 30 minutes. And that doesn't mean it has to be the 30 minutes sustained. It could be the 5 or 10 minutes here and there. Think about after your meals. Can you get up and move around? That'll burn up some of that excess sugar you just took in that your body is going to send to storage. Here's your no sweat workout. These are things that you just maybe do on a regular basis, but don't think of it as physical activity. Well, it is. The walking, gardening, raking, shoveling, those are things you kind of have to do. Playing with kids, that makes it fun. Climbing stairs, lifting groceries, vacuuming, washing the car. And I thought, when I saw that again, I'm like, oh, do we have a button on the TV that you actually change the channel? It's been so long since I had to do that. I had to look at my TV and make sure you can still do that. But yeah, hide the remote. Get rid of it. Here's your aerobic activity. Very, very beneficial in improving blood sugar control. Walking, probably one of the greatest motivators in walking is get a pedometer. That'll get you moving. Biking, aerobic, it's getting your heart rate pumping. Swimming, jogging, hiking, whatever. Anything that gets your heart rate pumping. And it's still weight-bearing exercises as well because you're on your feet. Make it fun. Do something you enjoy. If you hate doing it, how likely are you to keep it up? Here's the strength training, and I wanted to share a statistic with one set. They did this for men, but I can't believe that it wouldn't be associated with women as well. But they did a study of 32,000 men where they exercised with weights 5 days per week for 30 minutes, and they reduced their risk of type 2 diabetes by 34%. When they combined that strength training with aerobic, they decreased their risk by 59%. And St. Mary's actually in Grand Rapids did their own little study with their diabetes program. They brought people in, they educated them, but they also made them work out. And they tested blood sugars before and after workout. And that's what they found. Same exact thing. The instituting the weight-bearing exercises with the aerobic, drastic reduction in blood sugar levels.
So it's 30 of each?
Not necessarily. This particular study did not say they combined it. It wasn't that they now did an hour. They might have done, 20 minutes of aerobic and even 15 minutes with the strength training. So it's just the combination. And I should say that oftentimes it's more, 3 days a week they did aerobic, 2 days a week they did the weight training. So it doesn't have to be even on the same day. Because technically when you're doing weight training, you should be doing it every other day so that you allow the muscles that you've worked to rest, especially if you're doing whole body, that kind of thing. And again, it doesn't mean bodybuilding, heavy weightlifting. It's just strength training, resistance. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to skip some of these because we're running out of time here and I don't want to keep you too late. But just general physical activity and the overall health benefits, not related just to blood sugar. But I want to encourage you to think about your stress levels as well. One thing I want to note about stress is when a person goes into a stressful event well nourished, they are much more likely to handle that stress better than somebody who is not well nourished. So even though we're talking about physical health here, we have to think of our mind as well. Nourishing your body with the right kind of food, you've noticed that as well. Yeah, it makes a huge difference in how you think. If you're under a lot of stress and you're eating junk food, it is not going to help you to handle that stress any better. So what ways have you folks found to unwind? What works for you that kind of calms you down? Yoga, definitely. I apologize, it should be up here. Definitely. And you're physically active, so you're burning up some of those stress hormones. What else helps you?
I always like walking.
Yeah.
It really does a lot.
Yeah. And it's chemically too. You are burning up those hormones and burning up the sugar. Didn't take away the stress, but it reduced how you felt about that stress. Yeah, it's huge. These ones at the bottom, the deep breathing, the progressive relaxation, guided imagery, meditation. Years ago, I thought they were so flighty. Oh, it's just not me. I would never do that. I do the exercise and intense and really get at it. You think I'm going to sit down and breathe deeply? Oh my gosh, forget it. Well, one of the gals here at the center did a class one night. I thought, okay, you need to go. So I sat back there at the end of my day. It was a busy day. And she walked us through some of those where, you know, some of them you listen to tapes and they walk you through the meadow. And, you know, right now I just think this is so silly. It works. It's amazing. I was so bummed I had to drive a half hour home when I got done because I just wanted to, you know, crash. I was ready to have my dinner and go to bed. But it really does work. And those things, you can search the internet and find some really great programs to help you through that type of thing. Don't think that it won't work for you until you try it. You've got to go in with the right frame of mind. Then what can we do to improve our sleep? We saw that lack of sleep impairs our insulin function. Again, rising blood sugars. First up, are you tired of me saying it yet? Eat right. Okay, I'm a dietitian. Y'all knew that coming in here. So of course I got to pound on the eating patterns. But the junk food that we love so much is hyperstimulatory. Well, think of giving a child a bunch of sugar. Everybody knows they start to bounce off the walls, kind of like you gave them caffeine. Well, that does the same to you as well. So it's a little bit hard to sleep well if you're all bouncing off the walls all the time. In addition, get active. Again, why is your body going to get a good night's rest if you've done nothing all day long? It helps you to fall asleep quicker and get into a much deeper sleep when you're physically active throughout the day. Avoiding caffeine and alcohol. Enough said there. Both stimulants, as are cigarettes. If you're smoking, another reason to quit smoking. Smoking also messes with your blood sugar levels. So if anybody's smoking, that's maybe your first step. Establish good sleep habits. Plan your sleep. Schedule it. Don't do everything else and then, okay, well, if I have enough time to sleep, I'll go to sleep now. You know, and then get that 3-4 hours. You might have kids that don't give you any choice, but but it is. We do everything. Oh, sleep, we'll get it when we're done with everything. It has to be more of a priority for order us to sleep well. Make sure, of course, you have a comfy place to sleep. Make your environment comfortable. A dark room, a quiet room, hopefully, free of clutter. No craft projects in the bedroom, no projects that weren't finished, no laundry sitting there at the end of your bed. I see some of you going, whoops. No TV, I like that. Because those are things that keep you thinking. And when you want to go to sleep, you should just be able to rest and fall into that slumber that we talk about. Cool. 65 to 70 degrees was found to be the optimal temperature for good sleep. In addition, take away the sleep stealers. Okay, don't eat, read the newspaper, work in bed. And seriously, if you think about it, you need to train your body to think, when I get in bed, I'm now ready to sleep. If you are working or reading or eating or visiting or whatever, your body does not know what it's supposed to do when it gets into bed. Okay, so sleep or the other thing we do in bed, that's it. Turn your cell phones off. This is like a couple hours before you go to bed. That light that we get even from our cell phone is stimulating, and that can prevent you from getting to sleep well. In addition to your computer, turn it off. And yes, turn the TV off for the same reason. You know, if you're trying to go to sleep and you've got that TV on, are you not seeing all of this? You know, I sometimes wish that we could mute the screen, turn the screen black, just so we can kind of hear, maybe soothes us and gets us to sleep. But in general, we want it quiet. And that you kind of have to retrain yourself if you're in the habit of that TV. So, lastly,
Excuse me, I have a question.
yes.
Do people with sleep apnea have a higher risk?
Yes. Thanks for asking. The question was, do people with sleep apnea have a higher risk of diabetes? Absolutely. It is very much linked. Sleep apnea is where you go to sleep, but you wake up all the time because your breathing has been cut off. That's a pretty serious condition that needs to be addressed. And yes, they have higher blood sugar, so they are at much higher risk. And that's when I talk to people, I always ask about their sleep patterns. Do they need to be assessed for sleep apnea?
There's nothing that they can do about that, is there?
Sleep apnea?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely there is.
Aside from the CPAP, there's nothing that else.
Well, weight loss, oftentimes. Some people who have sleep apnea are overweight, and the weight is obviously in the neck area where it cuts off the windpipe. So if it's weight related, certainly the weight loss is important. Mm-hmm. Yep, but otherwise the CPAP machine, some people will use the CPAP machine, they feel so much better, they're able to lose weight, and boom, their blood sugars are better controlled. I didn't get through all your handouts, but I did want you to go to the end, to the what are you ready to change? Because now you've learned it all. What area of your lifestyle do you need to work on? Thank you. What area do you find that's important for you to make some goals? So the best thing to do is walk through that sheet, what are you ready to change, and ask yourself, which of the above behaviors am I ready to work on? And how satisfied are you with this aspect? How satisfied are you with your physical activity level, with your eating patterns, with your stress level, and how you handle that? How important is it for you to change? And this might be a list that you come back to from time to time to kind of remind yourself. All right, I said I was going to work on this, and I said it was really important. Why am I not addressing these behaviors? So in those, we talked about stress, we talked about sleep, we talked about eating, we talked about activity. Are you not playing enough for that matter? You know, are there relationships in your life that need work, that's stressing you out? What area are you ready to make a change in? When you set a goal, I encourage you to think of only 3 goals at a time. When you conquer one, then you practice it until you've got it down, then bring in another goal. But if, again, most of us, if we work on the entire lifestyle in all those areas at once, it's overwhelming. So take one step at a time, give yourself credit for what you're already doing well for your body, and then focus on the areas that you know you want to and can change, and practice. Healthy living solely comes from practice. It does not come overnight. It doesn't come from me telling you what to do either. Knowledge is power, but you have to put that power into action. All right, I'm past for you folks. I apologize for that. I'll leave you with this thought. Again, my registered dietitian coming out, nothing tastes as good as being healthy feels. Not even the ice cream or the sausages or the donuts or anything we talked about tonight, or the Girl Scout cookies.
You're going to talk about that.
Yes, okay. We have applied for a grant through the CDC to provide that program here in Holland. The Diabetes Prevention Program, it is a year-long program, again, free to you all. It's a lifestyle change program where you come for 1 night a week for 16 weeks for a group session about lifestyle changes, exercise, food, everything. We'll get into a lot of detail. And then from there, you come once a month. So it covers a full year to help you to prevent or delay that diabetes diagnosis. No charge to you. The CDC is paying us to put on this program. The hope is that we prove to insurance companies that this type of training is effective in preventing diabetes so that more insurance companies cover.
How will we know about it?
If you are interested at all, you tell me, circle your name on that sheet back there. We are like this far away from getting approved to provide the program, and I will call you because I will need to be recruiting people. We need to have, I think their group size, they recommend about 20 people. So it's not like you're going to be sitting in a group of 100. It's going to be a smaller, intimate group. So if you're interested, circle your name on that sheet, and I'll know to give you a call when we've got the approval and when we're going to do it. So, yeah.
So if you've already been diagnosed, you're not eligible?
Not for that particular program, but I'm glad you mentioned that. If you have diabetes, no, we couldn't put you in the pre-diabetes, the prevention program. However, insurance companies pay for diabetes self-management education. That is a program where you see a certified diabetes educator, a registered dietitian, and you go to group classes. The group classes are covered once in a lifetime, but then every year thereafter, they pay for 4 hours of education. 2 with the diabetes educator, 2 with the dietitian. I know that sounds weird. I'm a dietitian and I'm a certified diabetes educator. So sometimes you might see the same person for all 4 hours. Other times you see 2 hours with one person, 2 hours with another person, depending on where you go for that education. So take advantage of that. Talk to your doctors about that. The doctors know, but often they have so much to work with you on that they forget about what's available out in the community for education.
And that's not available for pre-diabetic?
And that's the question too. That's not available for the diabetes education program, not necessarily available for pre-diabetes, but I would rather you hear that from your insurance company because, you know, especially like Priority Health, they have case managers that call people with diabetes and follow up on a regular basis to coach them along as well. So in my experience, up until recently, they haven't, but that doesn't mean they're not now, and they can change any day.
And if it wasn't covered by insurance, could you pay out?
Absolutely, absolutely. You certainly could pay out of pocket. So if you're interested, I will get you the phone number for the hospital's cashier. You could, you know, if you live closer to Zeeland or you want to do that somewhere else, that's your prerogative to do that. You just need to find out what are the codes that are billed and how much will it cost. And so I can get you our cashier's desk as well. Most all hospitals offer this type of diabetes self-management training because it is so effective in helping people to control those blood sugars. All right. Any other questions? All right, comments? Yes.
What were the codes? What did you say we need to?
I will give you the cashier's phone number. They'll be able to give you the codes that are billed and the cost that it is billed. You want, and what you're looking for is your diagnosis code and the billing code. And I think typically you'll get a lot further with your insurance company to get a straight answer if you have that information. If you call and just say, will you pay for diabetes education with a diagnosis of prediabetes? They kind of go, I don't know. What are you going to bill? They want to know those codes. So much easier to get that actual information. Okay? All right. Well,
I do have
yes,
a question.
yes.
Let's say that you drink tea and you just can't drink it plain. You need to have a little sweetener.
Sure.
How is honey?
So honey is fine. Honey is the same as sugar. So a tablespoon of sugar has the same amount of carbohydrate as honey does, a tablespoon of honey. So that would be fine, yep. Sugar substitutes have no carbohydrates in there. Very, very small amount, which you wouldn't even count it. So if you like the sugar substitute, that will not affect your blood sugar in any way. The FDA still says they're generally recognized as safe. If you feel comfortable and you're not drinking tons of diet pop all day long or something like that, I still, will put a little sprinkle in the tea or coffee or over cereal or something like that. They're like 300 to 500 times, even more than that, times sweeter than sugar, so you don't use a lot of those. One packet would be as much as probably 6, 7, 8 packets of sugar. So you use very little of it. Yep. And again, you don't have to give everything up. It's just portion control and looking at how much you really consume of those particular foods. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. You're all great. Great audience.